Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for the stay.
Out here, there's no one way of doing things. No unwritten rules. And no shortage of adventure. Because out here, the only requirement is having fun. Bank of America invites kids 6 to 18 to golf with us. For a limited time, sign them up for a free 1-year membership, giving them access to discounted tee times at thousands of courses. Learn more at bankofamerica.com/golf with us. What would you like the power to do? Bank of America. Restrictions apply. See BofA.com/golf with us for complete details. Copyright 2025 Bank of America Corporation.
Welcome to another Britflix.com podcast. My name's Stuart Wright, and today we are talking about the Kazakhstan post-apocalyptic, relentless, ultra-violent, may I say neo-Western Steppenwolf, and 3 films that have impacted everything in your adult life with Mike Hewitt. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
My absolute pleasure. My absolute pleasure. Now, just for a little bit of background for listeners, Steppenwolf has some amazing film talent and involved with it. Just to let people know the kind of pedigree of the film we're talking about here. It is Ad. Oh goodness! You tell me what the name of the director is. How to pronounce it, please?
I say Adil Khan Yezhinov, but
okay.
I could be brutalizing that.
It's better than mine, and it's his 5th film. And if people know his work, they will be familiar with his Cannes selected The Gentle Indifference of the World and Venice selected Goliath, and it is produced by Oscar-nominated producer Alexander Rodnyansky, who produced Leviathan in 2014, which is where he got his Oscar nomination. So some pedigree with this film, Mike. So before and the film itself has won the Golden Raven at Brussels International Fantastic Film Festival and the Outstanding Performance Award at Fantasia Film Festival. Before we get into any conversation about it, do you want to give the audience a brief synopsis as to what Steppenwolf is and when and how people can see it?
Steppenwolf is a brand new Kazakhstan film, which comes out through Arrow Video on May the 26th in the US and the UK and Canada. It is, as you say, a sort of a brutal, hyper-violent redemption tale about a rogue cop who teams up with a woman looking for her son in a post-apocalyptic sort of landscape. And together they embark on a road movie and discover themselves. It's very unique. It's a Kazakhstan film, and I didn't know much about Kazakhstan film when I came across this film. So back in October last year, Arrow Video, who I used to work full-time with, they reached out to me and asked me if I'd be interested in producing a batch of new release films that they have upcoming. Okay. And during my time at Arrow, I was always involved with the new release films. That was where my passion lent slightly more than the traditional Arrow Video style releases. Yeah. So this is my first full production of a Blu Ray release for Arrow Video of this batch. And Steppenwolf, I didn't know anything about it when it was offered to me, so I had to watch it on a screening link, do all my research, and dived into the whole world of Kazakhstan cinema, which has been an amazing journey, to be honest. It's been eye-opening.
So in that sense, if it's been eye-opening, what's been a surprise discovery you've made then in terms of, I guess, Kazakhstan cinema?
Yeah, I mean, what do you know about Kazakhstan cinema? And to a normal person, you would instantly go to Borat. Yeah, would be the sort of go-to, and that's not really representative of the culture there. So the other main ones that have come out, I guess, are Leviathan, which you've mentioned, and a couple of others from this director, Adil Khan Yezhinov. He's done about 12, 15 films, feature films since 2011. He's got an extraordinary output, almost one every year. And in fact, in 2022, he directed 3 feature films. Most of them sort of like sit in the crime and drama field.
Okay.
But it was just fascinating to understand, you know, what Kazakhstan cinema was. And as part of my research, I really dipped into, you know, what the scene is like in Kazakhstan. So back in my research, I found out that, you know, the cinema of Kazakhstan was traced back as early as the 20th century when it was involved with sort of Soviet propaganda documentaries.
Okay.
And it was really during the 1990s when it first sort of started to hit its stride in independent films. And they were producing probably about 4 or 5 films a year during that period. And then around 2010, with the emergence of Adil Khan, there was a movement that began, which was called the Kazakh sort of New Wave movement.
Okay.
And they started to make more modern day films set around their own culture. One Kazakhstan director that you might know is Timur Berkmanbetov, and I'm probably butchering that name, but he is known for the films Night Watch and Day Watch.
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah, yeah.
And then there was a recent genre film as well called Sweetie, You Won't Believe It, which was released in the UK by 101 Films.
Okay.
So over the last 10 years, Kazakhstan cinema has begun to explode, and they're probably producing around 20 films a year at the moment.
When and how can people see Steppenwolf?
So Steppenwolf will be released on May the 26th via Arrow Video. That will be on a limited edition physical release, Blu Ray, in the UK, US, and Canada. And it will also be available on arrowplayer.com, which is Arrow's own SVOD channel. What we've also done on this, something I was very keen to do, was to include an exclusive feature film extra on the physical release. Okay. So we have one of the director's previous films, a film called Goliath, which will be included on the Blu Ray. This was made in special. It's something we did back at Arrow with The Endless. I don't know if you remember The Endless, but we, Benson and Moorhead's film, we sub-licensed a film to include it as an extra. And it seemed to go down well with the fans because you're getting 2 films for the price of 1.
Indeed.
So in my research on Kazakhstan films, this film Goliath stars the same lead actor who is in Steppenwolf, an incredible actor, as you see in the film, Stuart. You know, Berik Adjanov is phenomenal in the lead. So he's also in this 2022 film Goliath. Is by the same director, the same producer, and it's also got the same composer. So it just made total sense to try and include it as a. I think what we wanted to do was expose the world a little bit more to Kazakhstan cinema, because it doesn't quite get, you know, the mileage that the normal films do of recent times.
Can I ask you about your role then in terms of getting it? When you talk about getting it read, you produce the release for Arrow. So where does that start for you, and how do you set about planning what it's going to be? Like you say, the release is now going to include another film with it and stuff like that. So when you start with a blank bit of paper, which is a list of film titles, and like you go, right, Steppenwolf, what am I going to do? What's your role at that point?
It's a very good question. So obviously watch the film, first of all, and dive in and do as much research as I possibly could. So I learned where it had screened at festivals. This was back in October 2024 when I was offered the gig. So I knew that Arrow had submitted it to a couple of genre film festivals. It was playing at Mayhem in Nottingham. And it also played at Celluloid Screams in Sheffield the week later. Right. So I looked at who had reviewed the film to date, and there were the normal sort of people that we'd expect, like Anton Bitel had done a review. It had screened at Fantasia. It had won awards at Fantasia. And it blew me away. And the film is incredible. So I really wanted to give the best I possibly could to this release. So you're right. Where do we start? First off, it's a foreign language film. So there's going to be challenges of getting filmed interviews with the cast and crew. But the first port of call is can we reach out to the filmmakers? And a bit of sidestepping through the sales agent, we got in touch with the main producer of the film, a woman called Aliyah, who thankfully spoke English to some extent. And she offered, she accepted to allow myself to interview both herself, the writer-director, the two lead actors, the composer and the cinematographer.
Yeah.
So those were written interviews. I managed to sort of formulate some questions, send them over, got them back. She translated them for us. And they're included in a limited edition 36-page booklet within the release. And then it was a question of what else could we include on the disc, because Arrow are known for including many extra features. We want to contextualize the film. It's not just, for Arrow Video, it's not just the film, it's also about the film. So we managed to source a 15-minute making of documentary that we then had to find a person who could translate subtitles for us. So that is now on the disc. I wanted to get a commentary from somebody who had seen the film. So I reached out to a friend, David Flint, who had seen the film at Nottingham, and he's recorded a commentary. And the film comes across like a kind of mixture of transnational Western. It's kind of like post-apocalyptic. It's got samurai elements. So I wanted to create a video essay or look at creating a video essay. So I reached out to a chap, Lee Broughton, who's a film historian who specializes in transnational post-Westerns. And he wrote and narrated a lovely piece, which is about 22 minutes worth, looking at where the influences have come from, looking at the likes of Sergio Leone, George Miller, all of these sort of touch points.
You can see all that in the film, yeah.
It's very much a George Miller kind of Sergio Leone film. So he wrote and narrated this wonderful visual essay. And having worked at Arrow before, I knew we could work with their in-house editing team to put together a really nice 20-minute video essay. And then I just took a chance on whether we could look to sublicense the film Goliath. Luckily, I knew the sales agent that were representing the films.
Yeah.
It was Julian Richards at Jinga. So I just dropped him a line and said, look, could we license a limited number of this film and just use it exclusively on the Blu Ray as an additional drive for people to buy the physical release? And thankfully, he was open to that for a. So
when you say limited, how many physical copies will there be out there?
There'll be 3,000 copies in both the UK and the US of this release. Okay. So we anticipate to hopefully sell through those within a year or so. Fantastic.
Now I don't want to get into spoilers about the film, but I do have one question, which is which I'd love you to be able to answer for me. Is what's the story with the choice of the now iconic, once you get to watch the film, heart-shaped sunglasses?
The story with the heart-shaped...
Yeah, that's such an interesting choice in the film. Do you know anything about what that's all about, or where they came from?
Do you know what? I don't. I know that we locked in on it for the artwork.
Yeah. Of course,
so visually striking. So we had to use that. So these sunglasses, I think they were just discarded in the film, and they were picked up by this errant cop who is a sort of a nihilistic, doesn't care about the world anymore. And as he meets this female character who is quite a timid, stuttering wreck, she's looking for her son.
Properly traumatized in search of her son, yeah.
She's incredibly traumatized. They begin to get this connection, and the sunglasses for us, myself and Louise Buckler, who's the head of marketing at Arrow, we just felt it was just such a rich symbol of what these two characters go through without wanting to spoil where their journeys go. The way I see it is that one of the characters has given up on hope. The other character is just full of hope. So whilst some critics have said that it's quite a nihilistic, nasty film, I disagree. I think there is a lot of hope in this film, and I think these heart-shaped sunglasses symbolize that really, really well.
I mean, it's a bleak film at times, but yeah, I think the sunglasses represent a kind of, I guess, tar black sense of humor would be a way of saying it. I think it's
pretty black humor throughout. Yeah. There is humor in the film.
I know. Yeah, no, I agree completely. I agree.
But it comes through in a very thick barrel of oil for sure.
Well, let's remind people then, when and how can they see Steppenwolf?
So yeah, Steppenwolf, May the 26th on physical, along with a bonus feature film from the same director, but also available on the Arrow SVOD channel, which is arrow-player.com, or available on all your favorite platforms.
Brilliant. Well, look, thanks for sharing that little insight into how these things are pulled together. I have always wanted to know, and it's a rare chance to actually talk about it. So thanks for sharing that. And now, sir, we will move into the second part of the podcast, which is 3 films that have impacted everything in your adult life. Are you ready for this?
Let's go for it. For
those just tuning in who aren't familiar with this format, it is quite straightforward. Mike has given me 3 titles, of which I am going to talk to them in the order I received them. And we will talk about each film for just 5 minutes. And every time we hear this sound, you hear that at your end okay?
Mm-hmm.
Good man. First out the gate, Mike, is like Godfather 2, a sequel that's considered better than the original that birthed it. Lance Henriksen had supposedly pledged to quit acting if this part didn't work out for him, and it proved to be his most successful film. Marketing experts, years after the release, said this movie probably helped save Fox, which had been desperate for a hit at the time. Sigourney Weaver's Best Actress Academy Award nomination for this movie was the first ever for an actress in a sci-fi action movie. And when Fox execs saw an early cut, they complained to producer Gail Ann Hurd that it looked like the money had all been spent on sets rather than special effects. And she told them in delight that these were miniatures and optical illusions. I'm talking about James Cameron's 1986 sequel to Alien, Aliens. So tell me, Mike, where does this fit in with your film watching life?
Thanks, Stuart. I gave this a lot of thought, wanting to sort of build up a narrative of why this film in particular. And I wanted to start with a film that made my first major impact on me in terms of films are made and somebody can work on films. So I went through a normal list, like the first film I saw that freaked me out, which was Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, or the first film I saw in the cinema, The Incredible Journey, or my evolution through, watching Jaws at 9 years old, or, E.T. at the cinema. But I think what it was for me is I was late getting to the VHS scene. So I was born in 1972.
Okay. We're of a similar vintage, sir. I'm 71. Yeah.
So we were late getting a VHS. I was aware of VHSs. I was drawn to the VHS racks in shops, and I remember looking at the backs of titles like Zombie Creeping Flesh and thinking they were amazing. But it wasn't until Christmas 1986 where we got our first VHS player.
Okay.
And I'd become very good friends with a guy at school called Steve Sherwood, and I'd gone round his house because he was one of the first to get a VHS player. So I'd seen films with him like The Dead Zone, which was an amazing experience. But he had managed to get a pirate copy of Aliens. And I remember he lent it to me, and I watched it at his house first. And it's one of those films, as you know, that is just pitch perfect.
Yes.
An amazing blend of science fiction, action, horror, drama, comedy. It had a strong female lead. It just looked absolutely stunning. and it absolutely transfixed me, to the point where I would walk home from school almost every day. We lived about 5 minutes away from my school.
Right.
And I would watch it. I would bring friends home to watch bits of it. I would go home and literally I started transcribing the screenplay.
Really?
Yeah, I remember pressing play, pause, rewind, play, pause, rewind. And I wrote it, hand wrote all of the dialogue out. And I can still reel it off the first 20 minutes. Spire readouts are on green, looks like she's alive. Well, there goes our salvage, guys. So I know it all off by heart. And I think that's what really struck home to me, is that through this course of writing out the dialogue, I began to understand what films were and how they could be written and how characters interplayed with each other. And, that was a real learning curve in sort of my education of film. So I would have been 14 at the time.
Yeah.
Obsessed with films. Yeah, sort of obsessed with films up until that point. But it was this point where it went, I see. There's somebody who's written this. There's somebody who's directed it. There's an acting team. There's production team. And I began to try and work it all out, how it could all be structured. So I look, Aliens, I regularly rewatch it. It's still endlessly fascinating. It was the second VHS I bought because it came out on sell-through in 1989. I bought Return of the Jedi first, then Aliens. As a 16-year-old, sweating at the counter that I'd be ID'd, but I got away with it because I think it was an 18 at the time. But it was also one of the films that was one of the first to have a special edition released.
Finish your thought, sir.
Yeah, I was looking back on it earlier today, and it reminded me that in 1992 there was a special edition release. James Cameron pulled out a cut with an extra 20 minutes, which was just another bite of the cherry of why this film is so fantastic.
Thank you for sharing that. Right then, the actors in your second choice are all competent musicians and actually play on the soundtrack. During the infamous metal detector scene, the background voices making announcements over the airport PA are the band members themselves without their English accents. In his memoir, Father Joe, Tony Hedra, who plays, this blew my mind, who played the beleaguered manager Ian Faith, admits he'd attempted suicide the night before the first day of filming, and he credits the joy of the experience of being in the film to bring him out of his depression, which is kind of an amazing a story I never knew at all. And the director was originally going to be a band member, but Harry Shearer said he didn't look good in spandex. I'm talking about 1984's This Is Spinal Tap. So tell us, Mike, where does this one fit into your film watching days?
So I wanted to include a comedy in this list because comedy is my, I would say, my tied main love alongside horror.
Okay.
Although, horror is quite a common thing, and myself and you have met through our shared passion for horror films.
Indeed.
But I often think that comedy is often underserved and underrated. So I wanted to select a comedy. And the reason I've gone for This Is Spinal Tap, because post getting a VHS player, I hoovered up everything. I was taping films, I was recording Movie Drone, watching things like Wicker Man, Big Wednesday. I'd taped The Jerk, The Man with Two Brains, and I'd rewatch those. But by the time I got to college in 1990, there was we formed a small club of there was a group of us that would regularly watch films.
Okay.
And one of the films we watched in the first year was This Is Spinal Tap,
right?
Which absolutely blew me away. Now, again, as I mentioned, I loved comedy, and I was aware of there was a British TV show called Bad News at the time. I think it was released a couple of years before I got to see This Is Spinal Tap. So I remember watching Spinal Tap with 4 other people, I tweaked pretty much straight away that, okay, yeah, this is fake. This is a mockumentary, or if you will, a rockumentary. But it's just a phenomenal film, and we were all laughing away at this film. There were two people there that were convinced it was real. There was two of us that were convinced it was all fake. But the Spinal Tap, I go back to it again and again, and I watch it every year. We formed a bond. It's one of those films where if you've seen it and you know it, and you come across somebody else that shares a line of dialogue, you can't help yourself but carry on and do some other lines of dialogue with them. It's one of those films that just connects fans. So if I said to someone who had seen it, yeah, but these go up to somebody, it's going to be, they go up to 11. You just know they've hit the lexicon. It's a stunning cast, Christopher Guest, who obviously started, or not necessarily started, but revolutionized this sort of improvised fake documentary sort of style of comedy.
Yeah, of course.
Through things like Best in Show, etc. But it's so sweet. We laugh initially at these characters, but by the end we're laughing almost with them. They're dumb, they do some outrageous stuff, but they're not really mean. They're just people that are caught up in that sort of the world of music of the mid 1980s, which was often seen as that sort of dumb world of heavy metal at the time.
Yeah, and also I think it captures that idea that nobody's really ready to be famous. You're just still the person. You might well be famous, but you're still the person you were before. You can't suddenly become sophisticated and fully aware of the world around you. Normal
people can become famous almost, and the blend of Christopher Guest and Dave McKean, as two kids that have grown up and, they were writing their songs and they've gone through all of this, the backstories are just incredible in this film. They filmed all of these old 60s, videos, and the music is phenomenal. And I'm rewatching it again now with the rise of YouTube reaction videos, which has become this phenomenon over the last year or two. I'm getting to see the film through fresh eyes of people who are seeing it, and I still laugh.
It's a film you can it sort of rewards repeat watches. It's definitely one of those films, isn't it? That you can be excited for the funny bit coming. I guess a bit like horror in the way that a good horror film that has some, moments that are considered to be iconic gore moments. You can be excited for a gag, and it's weird to think, because a gag most of the time a gag is about the surprise, but the way it's performed and the way it's delivered, it gets better and better, doesn't it, with every watch?
100%. And there are minor bits in it that I've not spotted before. And funnily enough, it's one of the reasons I've been working for about the last 12 months on a book about the chronicle of comedy on film.
Okay.
And it's actually really surprised me how similar comedy and horror are in terms of gag setup. And
timing's all.
All about the timing. It's all about designing for a physical reaction, either a scare jump or a laugh out loud moment. Comedy and horror are intrinsically intertwined, as it were.
Yeah, and I don't know if you know this. When the film come out, friends of Rob, you were saying about you and your friends going, "Is it real? Is it not?" Friends of Rob Reiner said to him, "Well, it's all very well and good, but I thought you'd have picked a more popular band to make a documentary about."
It's beautiful. The elasticity of the reality in that film is stretched just enough that you can still believe it without going to like a Mel Brooks style of, well, that's obviously not real, and that's the beauty of it for me, is that it feels real. It all feels real.
Yeah, I was going to say, because it's framed as a documentary, not as what we know as found footage. It's not like someone's put this together. This is an edited piece of work, so it feels, like when it cuts to the 1960s and they're doing that kind of what is essentially status quo's pictures of Matchstick Men, but it's their version of it. It's like which harks back to like what Eric Idle did with the Ruttles. It's like it's very much like it's making a good comment on popular culture. Full stop.
Absolutely. I love it.
Indeed. Right then, for your final choice, Your final choice came second to Shawshank Redemption in a 2011 vote by Radio 1 and Radio 1 Extra listeners. George A. Romero, no less, king of the zombie movie, was so impressed by this British version that he asked for one of the leads and the director to cameo in Land of the Dead, if you can believe it. It reputedly cost $4 million to make and grossed $30 million worldwide. All the newsreaders and television presenters are real people portraying themselves, and many of the zombie extras are fans of the TV show Spaced. Parents of one of the main characters are played by Bill Nighy and Penelope Wilton, who also played husband and wife in The Best Marigold Hotel. I'm talking about horror rom-com Shaun of the Dead. Tell me more.
So Shaun of the Dead is a very personal film, and I've picked this for a reason that I'll go into. It's a merge of horror and comedy, my two loves. But essentially, I'd left college as a trained graphic designer in '94, and I was like, how do I get into film? I didn't have a clue. I was living in Torquay at the time. I went off traveling for a year, came back, and I thought, well, I'm going to move to London. And I spent 3 or 4 years working as a designer, and then I quit, and I went and started to write a couple of screenplays and thought, how am I going to break into film? How is it going to happen? And then randomly, I started talking to a good friend of mine, James McCavanagh, who mentioned one day that he might have this gig casting zombie extras in an upcoming film. Would I be interested in being involved? And of course, I jumped at the opportunity. It turns out James McCavanagh is good friends with a lad named Oscar Wright, who it turns out was the brother of Edgar Wright.
Wow.
So in 2003, I was freelancing at the time. I had no real work on. I threw myself into this fully. I turned up for a day as an extra in the back of the It's a Knockout scenes. I turned up for a test shoot of what would ultimately be Simon Pegg's walk to the shop to get a cornetto. I attended rehearsals at Elstree to become a lead zombie. I didn't actually get it. But ultimately, I spent 20 days on set of Shaun of the Dead, which is one of my most cherished experiences I think I will ever have. It was the first time I'd ever been on a film shoot. It was with the stars of Spaced, a TV show I absolutely loved. It was zombies. It was everything, that I was like walking around in heaven. I ended up doubling for Dylan Moran in a couple of scenes. Mm-hmm. So the scene where he gets pulled through the pub window, when you see Simon Pegg and Lucy and everybody else pulling on Dylan Moran's legs, those are actually my legs.
No way.
Yes way. I appear about 6 or 7 times in the film. And then in December 2003, I also got asked back for reshoots and managed to get a script standing next to Joe Cornish. So I've made some amazing friends that are still friends today. And it was essentially my whole break into the film industry. For various reasons, I met up with a couple of friends. We created a website of this called eatmybrains.com, which then led to me going to Fright Fest, and that ultimately led to me getting a job at Revolver Entertainment as their in-house designer. So not only was it my first ever film experience, it was a classic film to boot. It was a hoot to film. I managed to get to see the whole evolution of, the film through its marketing stages. It was a whole complete learning experience for me. To understand how this British film came into production. I've still got a script here that I've borrowed from production that I'll happily give back if they ever ask me. But I read through the script. I knew it was going to be a good film. And indeed, it's one of Britain's best comedies of the last 30 years, in my opinion, for sure. And obviously launched the stellar careers of Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright and various others. But yeah, I mean, it was a terrific experience. I remember going to the first premiere screening they did with Fright Fest. They did a preview screening at the Prince Charles, and myself and 3 friends got quite drunk and couldn't help but stand up and point at each other as we saw each other on set.
Fantastic.
Yeah, an amazing experience, and I've got nothing bad to say about any of the cast or crew. They were wonderful people, completely friendly. It was unparalleled.
It's quite amazing to think, like, because where it is now, obviously, it is considered sort of, you know, British horror film royalty, really. You know, in terms of you know, go back through the whole post-war period. You know, it's a film that will be around for another 30 years from now, sort of thing, and beyond. And to think that, you know, its premiere was at the, not, this isn't to underplay the idea of the premiere at Prince Charles, but I'm guessing at that time nobody could have anticipated its longevity, you know.
I don't think so, no. I mean, you know, the zombies weren't really a thing at that point. I think I'm trying to think whether 28 Days Later was around the same time or which came first, but that was another British film that relaunched the sort of the zombie genre.
I was reading while getting ready for this that Dawn of the Dead was coming out the same week, so they bumped Shaun of the Dead by a fortnight to allow for Dawn of the Dead to get you know, take everybody's zombie audience, I suppose.
Yeah.
Well, look,
there was obviously this big wave of zombie films. And it managed to hit the right tide at the right time, didn't it? But the writing in it is genius, you know, and the gags are genius. You know, Edgar Wright is an incredibly talented film director that has studied both horror and comedy and knows how both work.
I honestly, to be honest with you, Mike, though, I can't wait to rewatch it now to see your legs. As you can see my legs in a pair of jeans. That's amazing. Well, look, that brings us to the end of 3 films that have impacted everything in your adult life. Thank you for sharing those memories and experiences. It was amazing. And thank you for sharing that insight into the production of a new release for Arrow with Steppenwolf. And let's remind people, how and when can they see Steppenwolf?
Steppenwolf out on May the 26th across UK, US and Canada on Blu Ray and also on arrowplayer.com. My second Arrow production will be announced at the end of April, so it'll be out by the time this podcast goes out. That's a film by debut director Chris Scotch-DePaul, and the film is Crumcatcher.
Okay.
And I'm currently working freelancing for Arrow and another studio where I've just recently had the chance to interview and record a commentary with one of my all-time filmmaking heroes, which I can't reveal, unfortunately, because it's not going to be announced by the time the podcast comes out. But
no worries. We'll wait with bated breath. Well, it just gives me to say thank you very much for joining us on the Britflix podcast.
Thank you very much, Stuart.
Hey there, Hugh from Podderation here, and if you like today's show, we think you'll love Thanks for Playing. Join Matt and Lucas every week as they explore the wide breadth of the world of video games, talking about their favourites, talking about new releases, talking about old classics, talking about everything that makes video games some of our favourite hobbies out there. If you'd like to learn more, check out our website at podderation.com.